Welcome to In Focus with Silvana Pavlovska. Today we are going to look at an opinion which was published a couple of days ago online, and the title of this opinion is NATO's Challenges in the Asia Pacific. The opinion is from Mr Ordan Andreevski, and it was posted on the 13th of April, 2023. So let's hear it. The 2023 NATO summit will be the second time Prime Minister Albanese has attended an indoctrination event. Australia isn't a NATO member, and Australians have not consented to our government and the major political parties to follow the NATO agenda without scrutiny. This is a good opportunity to evaluate three important questions, says Mr. Andreevski. Is Australian engagement with NATO in our national interest? What is the national interest depends on how it is framed as a formal conceptual definition, which defines it or who defines it, how value is understood and measured, who benefits or suffers from the policies and public investments. From World War II, Australian society has been indoctrinated by the military-industrial complex, the security state and the mainstream media to support ties with the United States and NATO without scrutiny and risk analysis. Most politicians, security, and media are describing Australian engagement with NATO as a strategic opportunity to build military partnerships with the 31 NATO countries. They describe the war in Ukraine as being in our national interest, without declaring their conflict of interest by being paid for or indoctrinated by the military-industrial complex. Australians aren't told that the war in Ukraine is a proxy war which has cost Ukraine at least 350,000 lives. Ukraine is a bankrupt state dependent on American, British, and European Union handouts and unable to sign peace deals with Russia. Investing in military expenditure, wars, and war propaganda through NATO has been dressed up as investing seriously in diplomacy with Europe and building a global system that respects shared values and interests. Albanese seems delighted that Australia has secured a $1 billion Australian dollar contract to supply Germany with heavy weapons carriers after he committed us to spend 365 billion Australian dollars on AUKUS, pronounced AUKUS. NATO protects the unipolar world order by military force or through propaganda, sanctions, regime change, color revolutions, installing new despots, censorship. It represents the G7 nations at a time when the global majority are focused on multipolarity, a more democratic and fairer world order based on international law rather than a rules-based order. Most Australians, says Mr. Andreevski, and civil society want peace. They are co-designing better foreign and defense policy options for Australia and the world. They're using various platforms and the independent media to communicate. The mainstream media isn't interested in breaking their financial and ideological commitments to the war machine. Our own ABC, the Australian Broadcasting Commission, is strangled by elected and unelected special interests. Is NATO expansion in the Asia-Pacific good for the region? Is the question that Mr. Andreevski poses. Proponents of NATO expansion are trying to convince the Indo-Pacific Four, that is Australia, New Zealand, South Korea, and Japan, that this is the best thing Europe can do for peace and stability in the Indo-Pacific. French President Macron, who opposes NATO expansion. The left and the alternative for Germany are calling for their country to leave the European Union, stop the industrialization and new despotism of Chancellor Scholz and the Greens. Former Prime Minister Paul Keating has branded the NATO boss Jens Stoltenberg as a supreme fool for seeking to deepen the alliance's ties with Asia. Stoltenberg conducts himself as an American agent more than he performs as a leader and spokesperson for European security, says former Australian Prime Minister Paul Keating. The Japanese aren't enthusiastic about NATO expansion given their lived experience of World War II. Leading ASEAN diplomats like Kishore Mahbubani are asking whether the United States wants to maintain primacy or improve the livelihood of its people. China rejects NATO expansion. The People's Republic of China, through BRICS Plus, is offering a winning combination of peace, development, and mutual coexistence, as opposed to wars and fake promises by the G7 corporate oligarchs, the World Bank, and the International Monetary Fund, or IMF. India is nurturing ties not just with the US, but also with family members of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, BRICS Plus, and the global majority who reject the unipolar world. Indonesia is poised to join BRICS, not NATO. Is the NATO alliance the best way to creating a peaceful and stable world? Asks Mr. Andreevski. We need national, parliamentary, and foreign defense policy debate on the dangers to Australia, the Asia-Pacific, and the world of NATO expansion. The international security order is undermined by NATO through its hostile policies towards Russia, Ukraine, China, European Union, and Australia. Through NATO expansion, the world can become embroiled in a nuclear war. NATO claims it is a defensive, but its track record is of offensive wars in Europe and the Middle East. It claims to protect its member states from external harm when most of the dangers to NATO and non-NATO members, like Australia, stem from its militarism and propaganda. NATO does not respect ethics, democracy, human rights, or care for people, countries, and the planet. Instead of NATO, we need a new security and development architecture based on mutual respect, cooperation, sustainable development, and human rights. That was an opinion piece by Ordan Andreevski, who is a member of the advisory board of the United Macedonia Diaspora from Melbourne, Australia. He's written many other articles, some of which we've already broadcast on In Focus with Silvana Pavlovska, and I shall name some of them. Australian Foreign Policy under the Albanese government, 26th of June this year. Inhumane and unsustainable EU policies on Macedonia, August the 5th, 2022. Democratic solutions to despotism in Christian Orthodoxy, May the 31st, 2022. EU totalitarian policies and practices targeting Macedonia, February the 9th, 2022. How new despotism is undermining Macedonia's identity and independence, October the 5th, 2021. So that was an article, an opinion expressed by Mr. Ordan Andreevski, posted on Thursday, 13th of July, 2023, titled NATO's Challenges in the Asia Pacific. You've been listening to In Focus with Silvana Pavlovska, wishing you a good afternoon, and please don't forget to tune in for those of you who would like to hear this news in the Macedonian language, which will be coming up soon. Thank you. Bye-bye now.